Viewer discretion advised. This episode includes a discussion of a violent situation that may not be suitable for all audiences.
I tell people all the time, nobody is coming to save us. There is no grand plan in the sky to save America, and it's going to take every single one of us working hard. And we need everybody. We need all hands on deck.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
If you've ever wondered how you can be involved with your local Republican Party to help candidates win nominations and elections, or have influence with your elected officials, you'll want to stick around for my next guest. Salleigh Grubbs is the chairman of the Cobb County Republican Party, one of the largest counties in Georgia. In today's episode, we talk about how to get involved with your local Republican Party. Most importantly, Salleigh talks about why now is the time to get out of your comfort zone, because the future of our country is on the line and we need all the help we can get to preserve it. Salleigh Grubbs, thank you so much for joining me today. You're the County Republican Party chairman for Cobb County, Georgia, and you just were elected. What were you elected to at the state convention?
So at the state convention, I was elected as chairman of the over 80,000 counties. And so what that means is that for all the counties in Georgia that are over 80,000 in population, they have a chairman, and then there's a chairman for the under 80,000 counties, for all those counties that have less than 80,000 people in that county. So being the chairman of the over 80,000 counties, that means that it pretty much covers over 7 million residents in those counties. There's 32 counties that are the over 80,000s.
Out of how many?
Over 159 counties in Georgia. So it's the 32 largest counties in the state.
Very good. And that's a big deal. The whole state committee had to vote for you for this position, or who voted for you?
No, actually, the state committee does not. The under 80s and the over 80s are the only two positions that the body at large does not vote for. They are only voted for by the caucus. So all the 32 counties, they voted for me, so most of them.
You were elected from your peers.
Correct.
That's quite an endorsement for you.
I think so. I'm very excited about it. With the majority of the vote, I think people have seen what I've done in Cobb County, and they want to see it replicated in their counties, a lot of them. And I've already built some great relationships helping people, and so it was reflected in the vote.
That's very good. Now, in 2022, I was reaching out to a few people about things that were happening in Georgia, and your reputation is that you are the best organizer and the person who can recruit more people than anyone else in the state. So one of the reasons we're doing this episode and a few others like it in Georgia is because we want to give people around the country hope that all is not lost in Georgia, and that there is a plan and that activists are working the plan to get out the vote in November 2024. So what kind of things do you do in Cobb County that make you stand out?
Well, for one thing, since I was elected in April of 2021, which covered the 22 election, I had my team of people that ran as a slate with me, so we were bonded together, and I think that's very important. In a lot of these elections, people run for offices individually, and they don't necessarily have that connection or that bond. So the people that were with me in 22 were by majority the people that ran with me to begin with. So having close-knit relationships is paramount. Also, being focused on the elections solely and what it takes to have turnout as well as fair elections. In Georgia, we are focused on election integrity, and so that's one of the things that brought us together initially, so we just carried that through. So I had a great team of people working with me. And so when I ran this time in 23, people stayed with me. And so I think relationships and, being there for one another is certainly key.
That's very good. Now, for people who don't know, Cobb County is what, the third largest county in the state?
By population, we are the third largest county in the state, and we're tied with Gwinnett County for being the second largest delegation in the state.
Explain delegation.
So as far as the delegation goes, it means the number of Republicans that we have that are allocated per, there's a calculation per the previous presidential election of delegates that you can have go to the state convention.
And Cobb County, if I'm not mistaken, actually produces or did in 2020 the most Republican votes of any county in the state. Is that correct?
As far as
Gwinnett?
as far as presidential votes, we were pretty close. We were neck and neck.
Okay, so it's a very, even if people are not familiar with it, it's a very important county. And most people, when I meet them around the country, they're like, "Where are you from?" And I'll say, "Well, do you know where Marietta is?" And everyone has an idea of where Marietta is, and that is where Cobb County is.
Yeah, so in Cobb County, Newt Gingrich is from Cobb County, or when he was serving, he was from Cobb. Johnny Isaacson. So we've had many people that have served in the federal government and high levels of state government that are from Cobb. So it's definitely a political center of the universe in Metro Atlanta.
Absolutely. So when you're looking at what you're doing to plan for 2024, what are some of the things that you have planned that are on the horizon?
We are definitely planning on getting out the vote. I have a great vice chair of Grassroots to help develop the plan. And we have to, the Republican Party is the grand opportunity party. And we say we have a big tent. Well, we just have to prove it by bringing all those people in. So one of the things that's key to me is that we reach out into areas of the county that have not really seen a lot of activity, and that we talk about our values, we talk about our quality of life. And it was interesting, I went to an event this past weekend, and we talked about being a Frederick Douglass Republican. And I think the values and the quality of life are two of the things that we have to really hammer home when we're doing our canvassing. Okay,
that's very, very important to do. You've got a great grassroots team, and you mentioned your vice chair who's in charge of Grassroots. If people are listening to this, and let's say they've listened to War Room with Steve Bannon,
right,
they'll hear when they're listening to Steve's program or Bannon's program, that you need to be involved and become a precinct committeeman. And in Georgia, the precinct committee position is different than in some other states.
Right.
I like the way it happens in Georgia. So let's say someone is listening and they decide they want to sign up to be a precinct committee person or to get involved in the party locally in Georgia. What happens and how do you cultivate your grassroots base? And if they're brand new and they sign up to be a precinct committee man, what do they do next?
If they sign up to be a precinct committee man, what we try to do is get them involved in volunteering. We have lots and lots of volunteer opportunities. And it's not just doing the hard work, it's actually getting involved with the legislative process, understanding what your legislative delegation is and who those people are, to get people to understand that they can have an actual voice, and the GOP serves a purpose in that. If you go to these events, you're there with your congressman, you're there with your House District representatives and your state senators, and they can actually put a face with a name. So a lot of people, like you said, it's different across the country, but in Georgia, I agree with you. I think it's a great process because it means your everyday person can get involved and have an immediate impact on having those conversations with their elected officials.
And then as we move into 2024, they would actually also be able to help select delegates and alternates to the county convention. Then explain what they'd be doing in 2024 in that process, for the convention process.
So in 2024, we do our conventions in odd-numbered years when we don't have a presidential election, except in those years when we do have a presidential election. And so you can actually get involved in the process. If you're on your county committee and you're involved, you can also take the delegate route and sign up. We'll have a nominating committee people will sign up to become a delegate at the county convention. Then you go to state convention, district convention, and then to state convention. And that's the process how that people can take that path and end up becoming a delegate for their state and cast that vote for the President of the United States. And
At
this
the
is
RNC.
at the RNC. So this is the beginning of that process in 2024.
I think that's important for people to know, and also for them to know that even if they show up in their precinct committee person for the first time, they may not make it all the way to be a delegate to the national convention their first time out. But it takes them being involved in determining who's going to be part of that delegation to the district convention and the state convention, so that those two bodies can then select the people for the national convention.
Yes. And I think it's super important for people who want to be that person on the floor of the RNC and they want to be there below the banner, that this is the way you get involved to get there. And being a precinct officer, as I always call them, there's different terminology, committeeman or precinct officer. There's a lot of responsibility there, because that is, the structure is ingenious. I mean, really and truly, because that's how you get out the vote. That's how you get in your neighborhoods and your local schools and, go to PTA meetings, and how you recruit people. And then that's also connected to poll watching. I mean, for years you could go to the polls and see the same people, Mrs. Jones, who worked the polls because she was a retired teacher or whatever, and you'd get to go back and see her every once in a while and that kind of thing. So it really brings a sense of community to the whole process, because these people are your neighbors. It's very heartwarming. That's a good way to stay connected to your community.
That is terrific. Now, when you do outreach in your county and across the state, what are the kind of groups that you're reaching out to, and how do you help grow the party?
We try to incorporate what everybody wants to hear. When I ran to become chair in 2021, I went to some of the older, not necessarily aged people, but the older, more experienced people in the party that some would call the establishment. And some people said, oh, don't talk to the establishment. But really, the heart and life of the party is in some of the people that have been working there for years and years. And, I happen to be friends with, and one of my mentors helped turn Cobb red to begin with. And she's been a huge source of advice and counsel. And but she cautioned me. She said, remember, as a chairman, you represent people all across the spectrum, from the most far-right people to the moderates to the people that don't have a home in the Democrat Party, that are more fiscally conservative. They might be a little bit more socially liberal, but you represent everyone across the spectrum. So I try to have events that encompass all of those things. We've had Scott Pressler come. Scott is a big hit, and but he's about putting boots on the ground and getting the work done. And so that is very inspirational to have someone like Scott come and work with us. We have Greater Georgia now. Tea Party Patriots is also a great partner. So we definitely have a lot of involvement from many different groups.
That is terrific. How did you get involved in the party?
How I got involved? Well, I have been a dues-paying member off and on over the years. Got involved when my younger son was very small, but it would just prove too much to be a single mom and doing all of that at the same time. So finally, I got to a point in my life where I could be involved, and went to get involved in March of 2020 because I was concerned about the upcoming election. And I was seeing things that I didn't like to see in the newspaper, particularly when it came to Pennsylvania, and I wanted to be sure it didn't happen here in Georgia. And so I went to the local party office and said, what are we doing to secure the election? And so it kind of went from there, and then we had the recount in 2020, and did a lot of praying because I was not one that came up through the ranks of being a precinct officer and then being a House district officer. And, some of the people kind of looked at me a little bit funny because I did not pay my dues, so to speak. But I'm very passionate about our country. I'm very passionate about saving Georgia. I'm passionate about saving America. I believe that we're at a precipice that's very dangerous in this country. And sometimes I get a little frustrated when people go about their business and they don't really realize what's going on, that we're at the point where we could lose this country.
So that really motivated you to get involved.
Very much.
What are the issues that concern you the most right now?
The issues that concern me the most, I don't know that there is a legal pad that could take all the notes to write that, but the biggest issue right now is securing our elections. If we don't have the vote, we're Venezuela. And we do not have a transparent process at this point in time. And that's been ongoing since really before 2020. We don't have clean voter rolls. That's a big concern. So the vote, I would say, is the primary thing. And then aside from that is just the social engineering that's going on. Hindsight is always 20/20, which is kind of a weird thing to say because we had the pandemic to deal with. And when you look back and you see how that was used as an advantage for political gain for so many, what is happening in our country socially is breaks my heart. To know that, my grandson will not go to school and have the same kind of education that I had is very disturbing to me. And then on the national scene, when you see what's happening with the influence of China, you look at our foreign policy right now, which seems to be non-existent. You look at our border and you see what's happening at the border, which is not only bad for Americans, but it's bad for the people trying to cross the border. Yeah. You have a border that is in the hands of cartels. Innocent people are dying every day on the border, and I don't think Americans realize that we're just in dire straits at this point in time. You look at the number of children that disappear every year because of the border. This is not America. This is not America.
That is right, except it is America, but it's not what America should be.
That's right. That's right.
And I have just completed a tour of the border over the last month, visiting a lot of different locations. And one of the other things, in addition to what you were laying out, is that we have indentured servitude happening because of the debts that people owe to the cartels who got them across the border. Now they are indebted to pay money back, and oftentimes it takes years for them to be able to pay it off.
Jenny Beth, that's one of the things that also broke my heart. Is being the head of the GOP, I also have people that come to me with problems to see how I can help them. It may be something as simple as, I applied for a passport and I can't get in touch with my congressman. Can you help me get in touch with them? Or things like that. And I'm always happy to help people, even if it's not in my county. Even before I was chair of the over 80s, I would find the right person for them to talk to. And I got a phone call one day about a little girl who was 12 years old, who was originally from Guatemala, and her father used her as a mule to get across the border. And they came to Cobb County, and they were Guatemalan. They ended up with a family that was Brazilian, so they didn't speak Portuguese. And the father ended up getting into an argument and being arrested, got into an argument with the host, I guess you could call them the host family. They were working in a restaurant, It's really a big scheme because they're working, but they're giving all their money back to the host for the benefit of having a small room to sleep in. And then the father gets deported back to Guatemala, leaving this 12-year-old girl here alone without a parent, not in a home, not speaking the language. And so I got a phone call. All she wanted to do was go back to her mom in Guatemala. Her mother had put out, signs and stuff, and the little girl happened to find that online when she finally did get to a computer. And so I had a very, very small part to play in reuniting her with her mother. And that's just one story. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories, like you said, with the indentured servitude of these people that get here. Then they owe this money, and they know they have to pay it, or their lives will be ended.
That's right. And you have experienced that in a very real way.
Absolutely.
When we're at the border, they said these things are going on, and that every state becomes a border state because of these policies that the Biden administration is enacting right now outside of the law. And and you're showing exactly how it affects people. You said it concerns you because it's harming people coming across the border.
Yes.
You were personally involved in that.
Well, and that goes back years as well. In a business that I was involved with, we had an employee who lived in Mexico, went back for a visit, was coming back, had his 4-year-old niece with him. And long story short, the cartel took his vehicle, took his trailer, and wanted money. He didn't have any more money to give, and so they slit his niece's throat from ear to ear while he was holding her hand.
Wow.
And she died right there at 4 years old. And so that was during the Obama administration. So this is not something new, but it is something that has gotten worse and worse and worse. And something has to be done. Something has to be done.
And wow, that's a really tough story. And that happened, the person you knew him from work you were doing in Georgia.
Yeah, he worked for me in a business, yes.
And is he okay now? Have you stayed in touch with him at all?
I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but I don't think he'll ever be the same.
No.
I don't think he'll ever be the same.
One of the things that the border sheriff said is that they owe the cartel. I'm elaborating on this because you further the story that we've heard along the border. They said they'll owe the cartels money for getting across the border, but then when they get here into America, they're told where they need to go. So they have to tell, then American tax dollars are paying for them to go wherever they say they want to go. So they're told to go to New York or Marietta or wherever they might be told. And they get there and they're hooked up with another family that is indebted to the cartel and are told where to live, whether it's with a family or in an apartment or whatever, and they have to pay the cartel for their lodging. And then if they need any supplies for their job, the cartel provides it, but then charges them every single week. So they're in this scheme with the cartel, and they can never get out, which makes them indentured servants. And the money that's coming in, if it's coming over the table, the cartel is taking something from it. And if it's not, they're taking it before it ever hits them in the first place.
That's exactly right. I have a friend who works for an airline, and this is also happening on the airlines with these kids that they come over, and these are not, these are not necessarily teenagers either. These are young kids, and they're being flown all over the country, and they have an escort with them to take these groups of kids, and then they lose track of them. The trafficking aspect of it is terrible. The servitude of it is terrible. It's beyond comprehension. And you're right. I said this is not America. This is not the America I know.
No. We fought a civil war in this country to end slavery.
Right.
And slavery is happening right under it's under our nose. It's happening right now today, and people they're not aware. And if they are aware, there are people who get involved. So I'm not saying that you and I are turning a blind eye to it, but there are people who they don't want to look at it. They don't want to know this exists. It's
ugly, and it's beyond comprehension that that people just don't. It's not that people don't care, because I told the story of the little girl from Guatemala. I told that story and this is another thing about the GOP and getting involved as a precinct committeeman. Or a precinct officer, but even if you're not an officer, as long as you participate, you have that access to be able to understand and hear these things that you're not going to hear on the news, and you're going to have the access to talk to the elected officials. And I told that story one day at a breakfast, and people were like, "What can we do to help? Just let us know how much money you need. We need to get her home." And fortunately, I was able to connect with two of our state senators. And there were also a lot of things that happened on the Department of Family and Children Services side. A lot of other details I won't go into, but it started an investigation into that. And so at the end of the day, I was happy for that one girl. By the same token, there's just hundreds more like that. And I like to think that being involved in the Republican Party gives you that access to be able to make a difference.
Right. And it's it's you wind up helping in ways you never imagined
Absolutely.
that you would help with. And you can only do that because you've built relationships with people and they trust you.
It's one person at a time. Always do what you say you're going to do. Don't ever do what you say you're not going to do. Have integrity, have character, and be, people will criticize our politicians, and I say, okay, then you run for that position. You be that person. You step up with the character. You step up with the integrity. You be the one to make a difference, because everybody looks around like, oh, well, it won't be me, or, and it's like, well, if not you, who? And if not now, when? Because we're at the end of the line. I'm fully convinced that if we don't do it now, it's not ever going to happen.
And that's why you're doing what you're doing, and so many others like you are stepping up. I want to go back. I want to shift gears just for a second and go back to something you said before. You said that you were kind of warned about working with the establishment within the party.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to understand what the establishment within the party means, especially in a state like Georgia, where it's volunteers who step up and it's volunteers who take on these positions. It's not the elected officials who are making deals that benefit
Right.
themselves. And I think that it's important for people in Georgia, based on some of the things I've been witnessing in Georgia, for them to understand that people who've been involved in the party for a long time may be as strong of a supporter as the new people are for certain presidential candidates, may have been people who helped get those candidates to become the nominee in Georgia in the first place. And they have a wealth of knowledge and shouldn't be just completely discounted because they've been around for a while. They're not the same as there could be some who are the same, but by and large, they're not the same as what we're dealing with when we're talking about corruption within the government at the elected official level.
Yeah, when I speak about it, I am not talking about the government elected folks. What I'm talking about are the people who have worked within the party for a long time. And with one particular person who was establishment, it's not that person is establishment. It's that person is more moderate than a lot of people. So people have a problem with verbiage and terms.
Yeah.
They like to call people establishment if they don't think like them. Establishment is different than just being a moderate. Maybe you are you're a conservative, but you don't see, there's a big chasm in the state when the issue of life comes up. And we do have we have great legislation that passed thanks in large part to now State Senator Ed Setzler. The personhood amendment in Georgia was huge. And then there are people that want absolutely no abortion and no exceptions, and that kind of thing. So when you start debating on policy and that kind of thing, sometimes you'll definitely get in the weeds. But what I want people to understand, now having done this since 2021, is that when you look at the landscape of voters, not one sector can win on their own. And so, and that unfortunately is what has taken the Democrat Party so far left, is that they've had to go along with the leftist agenda. I mean, if you look back and you look at Congress and you look at AOC and Rashida Tlaib and some of those folks, when they were saying some of the crazy things that they were saying, you're like, even for Democrats, that's way too far left. There's no way that could happen. I was just at a Juneteenth celebration on the Marietta Square, and there was a booth there for the Democratic Socialists. And that just seemed, people just walked by like nothing was going on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we can't have these veins of extremism on either side. And I'm in a lot of different chat groups and things like that. And some folks are like, get them out. They just got to go. We got to kick them out. And I'm sitting there going, A, we can't win on our own. B, we need money. We need funding. I mean, we can't, as I tell people all the time, nobody is coming to save us. There is no grand plan in the sky to save America. And it's going to take every single one of us working hard. And we need everybody. We need all hands on deck. So we don't need personal skirmishes getting in the way of getting a president who
he's not a socialist,
who's not a socialist, or who's not a communist, or who is can speak without, I don't know, talking about crazy things that just don't make any sense. I mean, I love the days with our former president, President Trump, who Kayleigh McEnany, when she would go do a press conference, it was meaningful. It was pertinent to what was happening in the day. It was on point. There were specific responses. There weren't runarounds. And you watch a press conference today and it makes you want to pull your hair out because, to look at the American people and say, we're not addressing that. It just blows my mind, when you're talking about the levels of corruption that exist.
Yeah, they don't talk about it, and then the current president doesn't really do press conferences, and when he does, he's got a crib sheet so he knows who to call on and gets thrown marshmallow questions. Not just softball, but marshmallow questions.
Marshmallow questions, that's exactly right.
I'm not sure that would happen right now in light of some of the things that have come out about his son, finally, that the mainstream media is picking up on. But you and I are recording this right now in June, and by July or August, when we actually air it, who knows? They'll probably just circle the wagons and be protecting him even more by then. We'll see. What are the things that you recommend to get involved? So if you're listening here in Georgia, how do you recommend that people get involved? And if you're not listening in Georgia, what would you just say for the average person across the country for how to go get involved?
Well, for the average person across the country, Dan Schultz has a great book called The Precinct Strategy. I encourage people to watch any of those videos and to also to employ that strategy. I have a friend in Missouri who kind of watched my path, and he got involved, and now they've had real change affected in Missouri in his area. I've been on Bannon a couple of times and John Fredericks and shows like that. And I tell people, you have to get outside your comfort zone. You have to get involved because America needs you. So find out, go to your local GOP. If you can't find, I helped someone in Idaho, actually, across the country, make that connection. Google for the Republican Party and help people in Ohio that moved. They didn't know how to get involved. I got on the phone with their chairman in their county. Go to your county GOP, your county Republican Party, find out who the chairman is. Sometimes you might not get a response. People are busy. It's an all-volunteer job. Don't let that stop you because sometimes you just have to push to get connected. There's other groups that you can get involved with, like the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Ralph Reed's group, they do a tremendous amount. That just happened this past weekend. I really wanted to go, but wasn't able to go. So there are other ancillary groups you can get involved with that can help point the way. I get text messages from Scott Pressler all the time where he finds someone that signs up on his website and then he sends them to me, or he knows they might be in this area. I know the chairman in Fulton County or in Gwinnett, and then I send people along that way.
Scott's amazing.
He is amazing. He is an amazing man, and we love it when he comes and visits with us. So you can get connected, you can get involved, and the precinct strategy is great. And then training is very important, how to talk to people, how to relate to them, doing voter registrations. We always have a great time. It's become like another family for me. Everybody... To be with people, I can't tell you. I mean, one thing is turn off the news.
Yes.
Don't even watch the news. And get active because that is the one thing that is the most rewarding. And you're doing it with people that share your values. And so that's the best of both worlds.
That is terrific, Salleigh. Well, I really appreciate you spending time with us today with the Jenny Beth Show. And if you're involved in Cobb County, Georgia, make sure you reach out to the Cobb County Republican Party. And if you're not, pay attention to what Salleigh just said for how you can get involved locally. And let me just ask this before, I know I'm about to close it out, but let me just ask you one thing. Do you feel like you and others like you around the state are determined to win Georgia in 2024?
We are very determined to win Georgia. And the great thing is, now that I'm the chair of the over 80s, is we're connecting in a way that is very meaningful. And so when it comes to election integrity, we're able to have those lines of communication that we've not had before, which is very exciting for me. And then also to lean on one another, to support each other in events and in training and things like that. So I'm very excited and very hopeful.
So don't lose hope. Georgia is hard at work and Arizona is hard at work, and you understand how important the state is going into 2024.
16 electoral votes.
That we must win.
We got to win.
Well, thank you so much for being on today, and I look forward to chatting with you more in the future.
Thank you so much, Jenny Beth.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you like this episode, let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a comment or a 5-star review. And if you want to be the first to know every time we drop a new episode, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications on whichever platform you're listening to. If you do these simple things, it will help the podcast grow, and I appreciate it very much.